Comedian Tom Dreesen toured and opened for Frank Sinatra around the world for 14 years. But it was the personal lessons he picked up from the chairman of the board that marked his life and career. He shares some of those lessons and the Sinatra few ever got to see on this edition of the Arroyo Grande podcast. Come on. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Welcome to the Arroyo Grande podcast. Go subscribe to the show now. Turn the notifications on. Do that. I don't want you to miss what's coming. First, a little free flow before we get to Tom Dreesen. Have you seen this video of French President Emmanuel Macron arriving in Vietnam? They open the door to his plane and his wife Brigitte mauls him like an aged bear. What is that? I love the attempted recovery. He sees the camera and he seems to say, "I'm perfectly fine. It's okay." The last time I saw a spouse treated this badly on camera, it was video from the Diddy trial. Whatever tiff these two were having, the Macrons pulled themselves together and descended the staircase. Mrs. Macron did not take her husband's arm. The president later said, "We were squabbling and rather joking with my wife." When she smacks you in the face in public, I wouldn't call that a joke. I'd call for a restraining order. Whatever's happening between the president and his wife, they are both representing their country. This is not a moment to audition for Real Housewives of Paris, Brigitte, or to humiliate your spouse during an official foreign trip. That's what hotel rooms are for. My favorite quote was from the Élysée Palace. They said, "It was a moment of closeness between the couple." Yeah, her hands were close to his face. It was a moment when the president and his wife were relaxing one last time, having a laugh. I'd hate to see what a cry looked like in the Macron house. Anyway, I'm glad the president had no visible scars from his closeness. And I hope next time Ms. Macron remembers to keep her domestic abuse domestic. Now to our deep dive. Tom Dreesen is a comics comic. He has opened for everyone from Smokey Robinson to Sammy Davis Jr. He's appeared on national television more than 500 times. For 14 years, he toured with and befriended the legendary Frank Sinatra. Tonight, he joins me to talk about his incredible career, what Sinatra taught him, and why he always had to wear a tux with the chairman of the board. Here's Tommy Dreesen. What was your favorite night with Frank Sinatra?
Wow. You know, there were so many nights that in the car alone with him, where he opened up to me about his childhood, about his
driving
in
Palm Desert.
In Palm Desert. He would come and get me out of my bungalow. His compound was, his bungalows all on the outer perimeter. New York, Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap My Way, named after his songs. And he'd come and get me out of my bungalow and just take a ride, Tommy. And we'd ride. And some nights he'd open up about his childhood and things like that. One night, he told me something really personal. Really, really personal. And after he told it to me, he said, "I shouldn't have told you that." I said, "Well," and I'm driving back to the compound. The sun's coming up. And I said, "Well, it won't go any further than this car." He said, I know, but I shouldn't have told you that." I said, "Well, you know, it's not like we're strangers, we're friends." And I don't know what made me do it. I said, "Strangers in the Night?" He said, "For God's sake, if you're going to sing this song, get in key." So he goes, "Strangers in the Night." I said, "Exchanging glances." He said, "Wandering in the Night." I said, "Well, we're the Now we're singing that song, pulling into the compound. And you know, we get out of the car, I park the car, we got out of the car, and he said, "Good night, Tommy." I always tap me on it. "Good night, Tommy." I'm going back to my bungalow and I'm thinking, if I were to go back to my own neighborhood and tell all the guys in a bar, I was just riding around with Frank Sinatra and we were singing Strangers in the Night, they'd say, "Get the hell out of here." Yeah, but it happened. And It was a moment I'll never forget. Going to church with him, being on stages with him, him calling me back out for another bow. He'd do that every night in Vegas. Like when I finished my show, I would exit stage right, he would enter stage right, we'd crisscross. He'd go to center stage while the band is vamping. And he'd call me, "Tommy, come back and take another bow." Tommy Dreesen. To this shoe shine boy on my hands and knees, and Frank Sinatra's on the jukebox, and now I'm in this private jet flying all over the world, and now he's calling me back out on stage. Those are moments, those are hard to describe.
Tommy, come out and take another bow. Tom Dreesen, ladies and gentlemen. There he is. That's my man, my number one man.
Tell me how growing up in Chicago, prepared you for this life avocation?
Probably, I grew up in a suburb on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois, with steel mills and factories. They made everything from clutch plates to crankshafts, 36 taverns in the town, steel mills all around the town and everything. And I had 8 brothers and sisters. We lived in a shack, very poor. We had no bathtub, no shower, no hot water. If you had holes in your shoes, you put cardboard in it. If a window broke, you stuck a rag in it, So I shined shoes in taverns, I set pins in bowling alleys, I caddied in the summertime, I sold newspapers on the corner, all to help feed my brothers and sisters, and none of this do I regret at all. I think it was one of the greatest blessings. But how I got interested in comedy, the last tavern that I would go to, I'd shine shoes in all the taverns in my neighborhood. There was 8 of them in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
The last tavern I'd go to, my mother was a bartender, and my uncle owned the bar, my mom's brother-in-law.
Uncle Frank.
Frank Polizzi, yeah. And he told jokes behind the bar. And I would sit in the bar and wait for the shifts to change to go back out there. But I watch him, and he would tell jokes behind the bar. And I was a kid, but I was fascinated. I was 9 years old, 10 years old. I was fascinated that with his vocabulary, his vernacular, that he could pause at him and say something and cause this sound to come out of everybody's body and fill the room like electricity and unite everybody. And I just thought that was fascinating. And I used to tell many of his jokes that should not be told on a Catholic school playground, but that's what got me interested in being funny.
Wow. And it was a mixed neighborhood, the neighborhood you grew up in.
Oh, yeah.
Which also would pay dividends down the road. I mean, in your great comic pairing, which I'll get to in a minute. But tell me about, there's a shoe shine incident that you relate in your book, Still Standing, and where a guy demands that you sing a song.
Yeah.
What happened there?
My brother, I was supposed to try out for a Little League. Little League had come to Harvey, Illinois. Okay. And I was a good athlete. I love sports. And so I went to try out for it. And I made it. But at the end, the guy said each kid would need $20. And it was for like insurance. And you had to buy your own spikes or something like that. You got your uniform free. And I walked away knowing I can't that wouldn't happen for me. I had to meet my brother that night and shine shoes in all the bars. My older brother and I would go in the bars. And the first bar we went to was Sparrow's Tavern, and it was a straight bar. My brother went to the end of the bar, and I started at the front, shoe shine, shoe shine. We charged 15 cents a shine. Most of the time you got a quarter if you're lucky,
Yeah.
So anyhow, the third guy I got to was a big red-faced drunk. He turned around and he said to me, "Yeah, I want to shine. I want to shine. And I'm going to give you $2. And he put 2 $1 bills up. Now, when my brother and I had a good night, rarely had a good, it would happen, but if we had a real good night, we could go to the bakery and get eclairs, day-old eclairs, and bring it home to my brothers and sisters. And we looked like Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle walking through that with eclairs. Yeah. So when he held up the $2, I looked at it, he said, "I'm going to give you $2. And my brother looked, and I looked, and, it's eclair time. I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "No, hold on. You got to sing Chattanooga Shoe Shine Boy while you're shining my shoes." Now, it was on all the jukeboxes, and I knew the song, but I was too shy and too embarrassed to do that. I said, "Sir, I don't know that song." And my older brother was a tough guy. He said, "Sir, he knows that song." And he gave me that look like it could be also butt whipping time if you don't
if you don't sing the song.
Now, I'm so embarrassed, and all the bar got quiet. And I start going, "Have you ever passed the corner of 4th and Grand where a little ball of..." No, I can't hear. We can't hear him, can we, boys? Can't hear him. Oh. Can't. Now I'm just about ready to cry. All of a sudden, I hated this big, fat, red-faced drunk. I hated him, and I hated my father, because if my father wasn't an alcoholic, at that moment I hated him, that I wouldn't be in this bar. I'd be out there playing baseball with the kids. But I sang that song, and I sang it with more energy. "Have you ever passed the corner of 4th and Grand where a little ball of ribbon has a shoe shine stand?" And I did so. He pops a boogie woogie rag, and I popped there. Pow, pow. The Chattanooga shoe shine. But when I got done, I stood up and I said, "I want my $2. And he started to applaud. And the whole bar started to applaud. And no one had ever applauded me before. And I thought, wow, all of a sudden, he didn't look like a big red-faced drunk. He looked like Santa Claus. and I always say, to this day, whenever I walk by a baseball park, if I see a little boy with holes in his shoes and raggedy clothes, peeking through the fence at other little boys with baseball uniforms, I know just how he feels. And to this day, whenever I see somebody on stage getting applause and cheers for the first time, I know just how they feel too. And then I walk away and saying, have you ever passed the corner?
And pop that rag.
Right, yeah.
Tell me, you then go into the Navy. You sell insurance when you come out and you're really good at it. Tell me how you meet Tim Reid, who would become your comedy partner.
I dropped out of high school at 16, running with a tough group and all that stuff. At age 17, I went in the Navy, got a high school diploma from the Navy, and I went taking courses in junior college and stuff. Anyhow, I get out of the Navy, I get married, I got 3 kids. I'm wandering from job to job. I'm a bartender, I'm a truck driver, I'm a Teamster union guy loading trucks. Then I dropped my Teamster card and I became foreman of all these Teamsters, 48 guys. I just went from job to job, wandering aimlessly, never finding what it is I wanted to do. I joined a civic group called the JCs, Junior Chamber of Commerce, that worked on problems of the community. And doing so was taught you leadership training program, how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee, how to conduct a meeting, Robert's Rules of Order, et cetera, et cetera. And I got very active in community affairs. And I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor, a concept I had. That in those days, they weren't teaching drug education at a college or a high school level, let alone elementary school level.
Wow.
But I wanted 8th graders to know about this before they went into high school. In many cases, we were too late. They were already on.
And using comedy to do it.
Well, playing records, getting their attention, and then doing jokes and getting the kids laughing, and then planting the seeds, opening up their minds, getting them relaxed. And Tim Reid, again, let me digress here for a minute.
Okay.
I was praying at that time. I was wandering aimlessly. I was saying, God, what it is I'm supposed to be doing? This can't be it. These job after job after job. I would do them well, but I wasn't satisfied. I was be in the bars with my buddies at 2 o'clock in the morning drinking, thinking I don't belong here. But I didn't know where I belonged. So I'm praying.
At Ascension Church.
At Ascension Church, where I had been an altar boy. You did your homework. I've been an altar boy. I sang in the choir. My mom sang in the choir when she was a young girl. Anyhow, and so when the night I'm proposing this drug education program to the JCs for them to sanction it, after I got done, a young black man comes up. He had just joined the chapter. He graduated from Norfolk State College. E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago. He comes up to me and he said, I'd like to work with you on that project. I said, gee, I'm sorry. I already got a friend of mine named John DeBoer, a white guy. Again, as prayers are answered. The next day, John DeBoer calls me and said, I can't do that with you. I got a new job and I can't do that project. I said, gee, what was that black guy's name? Oh yeah, Tim Reid.
Wow.
Call Tim. We work on the program. We go into the school systems. The program became very successful. JCs use it as a model program in 50 states and 22 foreign countries on how to teach drug education at an 8th grade level. It program very successful. One day, leaving the classroom, a little 8th grade girl said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us because no one had ever done that before. So we started writing what we thought was material. Keep in mind, there weren't any comedy clubs in America in those days, 1969. There were no...
Where did you play?
We had to do what they call the Chitlin circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. The 20 Grand in Detroit, that's where the Motown was in those days. Right. The High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, Guys and Gals Lounge, the Cotton Club, Sugar Shack in Boston, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City. And then we ended up working the Playboy circuit as well. But
what was it like to be the first integrated comedy act? Well, it was the first of its kind.
Yeah.
People had to go, there had to be some audiences that went, whoa.
You would be in a rowdy, noisy club, and they'd introduce us. People would hear an introduction. We'd walk on stage, and you'd hear a hush. Uh-oh, what is this all about? A black guy and a white guy, And it was. I mean, on the 4th time on stage, a guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face, and then tried to beat the hell out of me. And I boxed when I was in the service, but he outweighed me by 100 pounds, and it was just some redneck, The interesting thing about racism in those days, if there was a black guy who hated white people, hated them with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me. If there was a redneck white guy who hated, black people, he wasn't. He was mad at.
Wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at you.
Me for being with Tim. I was the N-word lover, and he didn't mind calling me that.
Wow.
So, but that happened rarely. For the most part, people liked what we did. Once in a while, you'd run into that element.
Well, I remember seeing clips of the act and pictures of you all together. It seems to me it was really a continuation of what you were doing in your program because you were bringing people together, you were unifying people and trying to lighten their load a bit and realize we're all in this together and we're really the same.
Well, absolutely. The interesting thing is people think that the comedian is bringing the audience together. The audience is bringing the audience together with their laughter. The audience brings themselves together with their laughter. I don't know how many times I've said this, but the one thing that I will take to my grave, and Tim will do the same, I can't tell you how many times we did colleges, high schools, anywhere there was racial tension, we went there. Prisons. Wow. We did 11 prisons in 1 year. I can't tell you how many times a young black kid would come up to us afterward and say, I got a white friend that I'd like to reach out to, but if I do, the brothers are going to call me names. But after watching you and Tim, I'm going to do that. Then a white kid would say, I have a black friend that I like, but the white guys are going to give me a bad time. But after watching you and Tim, I'm going to reach out to my black friend.
Why did the act work, Tom? Why did it work?
It worked because, A, we really liked one another. We really were good friends. We liked one another. And we had some funny stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, we walk out in front of we used to work a place called the Club Harlem in Atlantic City, New Jersey. In most nightclubs in those days, you opened on a Monday and closed on a Saturday. At the Club Harlem, you opened on Saturday, first show 10 o'clock at night. You closed on the following Friday. First show, 10 o'clock at night. Second show, 2 o'clock in the morning. Third show, 6 a.m. in the morning, called the breakfast show. All the waiters and the waitresses and all the night people would come, and all the pimps would bring their hoes from Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, New York, come down for the Club Harlem. The show would open with Mama Lou Parks and her dancers, a heavy-set black woman with all these dancers, get them rocking and rolling. Then it'd be a male singing group, a female singing group, then comedy. Then the headliner would be Smokey Robinson or the Temptations or the OJs or whatever.
Wow.
Now, the 1,300 black people. When it came time for us to come out, the MC would say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a comedy team from Chicago. This team, he kept saying team, came all the way from Chicago, and it's the first time this comedy team's been here in Atlantic City. Welcome the comedy team of Tim and Tom, and Tim would walk out by himself. And we're really happy to be here, blah, blah, blah. And pretty soon people saying, he said, we just arrived yesterday. I don't see we, I see he. What are you talking about? Now, I would start coming out stage left, and the spotlight would hit me, and you hear, what do we got here? I'd be looking in the audience. I'd work my way up to Tim, and he'd say, where you been, man? I'd say, I don't see any of my people out there. He'd say, and the people are laughing. He said, I don't see any of your people either. I'd say, put my arm around them. Well, we better be funny. What do you mean, we, white man? And erupt in the laughter. And one more thing I want to tell you. Yeah. That picture you see of Tim and Tom, there's a picture of us on stage at Mr. Kelly's in Chicago. I'll show you. I wanted our book. We wrote a book called Tim and Tom, an American Comedy in Black and White. I wanted the book to be called Before Our Time, because everybody who saw us said, you guys were before your time. That picture of Tim and I on Mr. Kelly's, we were doing a routine where I was interviewing the first black president of the United States. In 1970, we were doing that bit. And I said to him, now that you become president, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to ask Congress to enact a law that dead people are not allowed to vote in Chicago. Big laugh. I said, what's the second thing you do? He said, I'm going to ask Congress to enact a law that live people aren't allowed to vote in Mississippi. and we have them.
Yeah, and it would go on from there. Yeah. Why did you all end up breaking up?
We have two sides of this story, Tim and I, but I mean, we love each other. He's like a brother to me. His children call me Uncle Tom. I mean, which is funny.
No pun intended.
I'll tell you a funny story about that later. But anyhow, a woman broke the act up. And we always knew the first time we started to go into show business. My only reference to show business, where I grew up, was a black singing group called the Dells. They had Oh What a Night, Stay in My Corner. And I went over to the lead singer's house with Tim. Marvin had lived across the street from him when I was growing up. And I said, Marvin, we want to become a comedy team. And he gave us encouragement. As we were leaving, he said, you know they're going to break you up. We were leaving. We turned us in. He said, they? I said, who? He said, there's a game people play called Divide and Conquer. They're not going to like the fact that you two are getting along. There are certain people, black and white, that aren't going to like that. So be careful. And Tim and I got in the car and said, we ain't gonna ever let anybody break us up. But one day it happened. And in retrospect, today we talk about it all the time, that it was the best thing that happened for both of us. Because Tim went on to be Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati. He was on Simon and Simon. He played Downtown Brown. He was on a show called Frank's Place. That was a brilliant show that he created. He was on another show called Sister Sister. He played the father. Very successful director.
Yeah. And tell me, when you just in passing reference the people that you were performing with, Smokey Robinson, and I mean the quality of those performers, the Dells, Marvin Gaye. We don't have anything like that today, Tom. And the variety, the entire idea of an act with talent that you could do anywhere, that's really not, it's not part of the American entertainment today in that way.
You know why? Because we paid more dues in those days. By the time we got there, we were ready for what you'd call the big time.
Yeah.
You know, we paid a lot of dues. Sometimes they go on TV now with 5 or 10 minutes and they're thrown into a headlining situation, you know. It was the dues paying.
Yeah.
And in that era, oh my God.
And the camaraderie.
Yeah.
I always, you know, I interviewed Tim Conway once and I said, why did the Carol Burnett show work? And just what you told me, we loved each other.
Can I tell you an interesting story about that? Jerry Lewis and I knew Dean very well. I did the Dean Martin shows, and I did the telethon maybe 22 times.
Wow.
And Jerry and I got along. Well, Jerry was in my dressing room one night, came to my show, and I was working at the Riviera, and we were talking about comedy teams because I was with a team, and of course he was with the famous Dean Martin and Lewis. And he said something very interesting. He said, Tom, when Dean and I started out, we didn't have great material. You know, we had material like, did you take a bath today? No, why? Is one missing? He said, vaudeville jokes. He said, but we had the love we had for one another. The audience saw that. Right. They saw that we loved one another. And he said, you know, Tom, they also saw when we didn't love one another. You know,
the audience always knows.
it picked up on, at that time, a Catholic and a Jew being a comedy team.
Yeah.
Wow, who would have thought? And yet it worked because they really loved one another at that time.
And you could feel it. And the audience was pulled into it. Tell me about being booked on The Tonight Show, what that was like the first time. Because people don't realize, kids don't realize, but they should. The Tonight Show of Johnny Carson's era, and even before it, was not the Tonight Show of today.
No.
This was you had 20, 30, 40 million people watching this show a night. It was huge.
One appearance on The Tonight Show, and your career was made. Freddie Prinze did one appearance. He got a sitcom the next day.
Wow.
Now, that was in 1972 or 73. Johnny Carson came out here in 72. When the team split up, it was 1975. I came out here. I'm broke. I leave a wife and 3 kids back in Chicago. I'm ended up sleeping in an old Nash Rambler, not my car, a car that was up on blocks. The front seat came down, and I slept in that car for over a month, hitchhiking up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store. And finally got on at the Comedy Store. Took a long time. I got the Tonight Show to come and see me. A guy named Craig Tennis was a talent coordinator. And I auditioned that night with a comedy team called Baum and Eston and a new kid named Billy Crystal. I don't know whatever happened to him.
What happened to Billy Crystal?
I'm on the Raymond Aurora show. Eat your heart out, Billy.
Yeah, that's right.
But anyhow, and Billy and I got the show. So now I get there. They tell me you're on next Tuesday. I was so excited. I tell the whole world. I get there. They put me in makeup. They take you up to your dressing room, bring you down to the green room. They come in the green room and said, we ran out of time. You have to come back next week. They bumped me. I came back next week in the makeup, upstairs, down to the, they ran out of time. 3 weeks in a row. The 4th week I get there, I'm in the makeup room. The producer, Fred DeCordova, came in. He said, I got bad news for you. I said, what? He said, you're going on tonight. 30 million people watching the show.
Wow.
You get a lump in your throat the size of a grapefruit. But anyhow, I get behind that curtain. The coordinator, it's my turn to go on, and the coordinator said, you okay? I said, I'm fine. You're behind that curtain. Doc Severson's playing music because you're in commercial break.
Right.
The music stops, and your heart stops because Johnny's starting to introduce you now. The light comes on the curtain. You're about to go through there. Not only does every coordinator and all the talent scouts of Las Vegas and managers and agents and casting people watch that show, but my mother had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois. If I bomb, I can't even go back home. Johnny says, we're back now, and I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight because my next guest is making his first appearance on The Tonight Show. That one line, he never does it again that first time. I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight. He set that tone. They open up the curtain, you walk out, I can't see the audience, bright lights. I hit my mark on the floor. I do the first joke and it gets a laugh. I do the second joke, it gets a laugh. I do the third joke, I hear Johnny and Ed McMahon laughing behind me. Now I'm on a roll. I get an applause. I ended up getting 8 applause. It was a hot show. I close with, I said, you've been a wonderful audience. And show business is a tough life. So if you liked me, just if you liked me and you're Protestant, say a prayer. If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please?
I love that you remember the joke you told on The Tonight Show. I guess it's just one of those moments you never forget.
I did 61 appearances on The Tonight Show, but I never forgot that first one. Wow. That first one, the next day, I never stopped working since that night. I never stopped. That was 55. I mean, I'm in the business 55 years, but that was 50 years ago. After that, I'm doing Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, rock concert, Soul Train. I'm the only white comedian ever do Soul Train because I had an album out in front of an all-black audience called that White Boy is Crazy. You know? and then Sammy Davis Jr. took me on the road.
Tell me about working with Sammy. You write about Sammy in the book, and I saw Sammy so many times. He was really special and good to you.
And really good to me. There's nobody, Sammy Davis Jr., there was nothing he couldn't do on a stage. He could sing as good as anybody out there. Frank Sinatra told me, he said, I never heard Sammy hit a clinker. Once in a while, Frank would hit a clinker. Yeah. He said, I never heard Sammy hit a clinker. He could sing as good as anybody out there. He could dance better than anybody out there. He could play
drums.
He could play the drums. He could play he could play xylophone. He could play the trumpet. He could play piano. He could do impressions, to me, better than any impression out there. Yeah. And he just was magic on the stage. And he saw me, and I did a whole routine about growing up in a black neighborhood, and about how the black girls jump rope and how the white girls jump rope. Me being the only white player on an all-black basketball team. Sammy fell on the floor laughing. And said, I'm going to take you on the road with me. He had a TV show called Sammy and Company.
Because you did the show first.
I did the show. And then he said, and he did. He took me on the road for 3 years. First time he took me to Vegas, he said, have you ever worked Las Vegas? We were at the Mill Run Theater in Chicago. Huh. I said, no, I never worked Vegas. He said, well, I'm taking you there. January, you open there in January. We go there, jet lands. We're coming down the strip. My name on the marquee with Sammy Davis Jr. Now, a lot of opening acts didn't get their name on the marquee, you know, or if it did, very small. Sammy had my name up there big on the marquee, you know. Now we go into the rehearsal. Nat Brandywine was the entertainment director. And he said, Tommy, you'll do 20 minutes. Sammy does an hour and 10. We do an hour and a half show or a 90-minute show. Sammy said, no, hold on. He said, they serve food here when Tommy's on. This is Tommy's first time in Las Vegas, and all the critics are there. He's got a score, Nat. He said, I'll go on first. I'll do 3 or 4 songs. When the room is clear, I'll bring Tommy out. This is unheard of.
The headliner opening for you.
My first time in Las Vegas. That's the kind of guy Sammy Davis Jr. was. Now he goes out. Now, the waiters and waitresses, their job is to get the food out of there before the headliner comes out. Right. Sammy walks out. They're taking food away from people who haven't even started eating yet. They're snatching food off the table. Sammy does 4 songs, 4 songs. Now, that room is now up here. Yeah. He said, ladies and gentlemen, he'd do this every night. He said, through the years, you stuck with me through the good times and the bad times. He said, I think of my audiences as family, and you're family to me. He said, when people do good things for you, family, you want to do something for them, like maybe get them a gift. I got a gift for you. I saw this kid. You're going to like this. His first time in Las Vegas. That's the way he introduced me. And I was always thinking, tone it down a little bit, you know. But I would walk out every night and I'd say, you know, I've always dreamed that I'd work Las Vegas. And I always dreamed it would be Caesar's Palace. But I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act. And Sammy liked the line, you know.
It's a great line. Yeah. And how long did you toured with him for 3 years?
3 years, yeah. He told me one time, he said, Tom, you got to move on. I want you to become a bigger star. If you stay with me, that won't happen. He said, I'm going to take you from, those days, he said, from $3,500 a week to $7,500 a week. That was the pay in those days, which was a lot of money. Yeah. And he did. He increased my pay. And then I went on the road after that with Smokey Robinson and Gladys Knight and the Pips and Natalie Cole. But Smokey and I toured together for several years, too.
Really? What was that like? You don't mention him much in the book.
Well, I love Smokey Robinson like a brother. Yeah. Every year I'd run 26 miles for multiple sclerosis because my sister had MS. Yes. We called it 26 miles for darting. I'd bring in 20, 30 celebrities to run with me a block, 2 blocks, a mile. Top-notch celebrities. And Smokey. Smokey ran all 26 miles. He's the only one who ran 26 miles with me. And it's touring with Smokey. I mean, you know, today he calls me baby brother. We play golf together and everything. And probably when I get done, I'll call him and say hello to him. And no one loves to sing for you more than Smokey Robinson. He loves to sing for you. He wants to sing for you. It isn't a job for him. He's really special. And by the way, he's written almost 5,000 songs. You know that, don't you?
I did. No, I did not. And we've seen him. I've taken my children to see him, and it's magical. I mean, it's magical. Legend.
He's the most Christian man I've ever met in my life. He truly loves all people. He truly does. He's the most Christian man I've ever met.
Tell me about meeting Jack Benny, and he gave you some advice about stand-up.
And when I was only a comedian about 4 months, and a man named Irv Kupcinet from Chicago, who had a column in the Chicago Sun-Times, had a TV show. And Kup wanted to put on a young comedian, a new comedian, and a more senior comedian. And I'm a fan of Jack Benny's. From a kid, we had radio. We didn't have TV in the shack I lived in. I heard him on the radio. I've always thought an artist, a person is an artist in any endeavor. If you're a truck driver, a bricklayer, or a bartender, if you make your work look one word, effortless. Frank Sinatra made singing look easy. You will be my music. You will be my song. You say, I can do that. No, you can't. He just made it look like you could. Jack Benny made comedy look easy. He just made it look easy. He made it look easy, and it isn't easy.
No.
So I was a big fan, but he said to me, Tommy, where are you from? I said, I'm from Harvey, Illinois. He said, talk about that in your act. I said, Harvey? He said, talk about when first time you do the Tonight Show. Now, the Tonight Show was the furthest thing from my mind.
Wow.
He said, first time you do the Tonight Show, you're going to introduce yourself to millions of people. Do comedy about where you're from, so they know your accent, your brothers and sisters, where you went to school, so forth and so on, your mom and dad. So after you walk off the Tonight Show in 6 minutes, they say, wasn't he funny? And do you know that he's from Harvey, Illinois? And do you know that he had 8 brothers and sisters? And do you know that he went to Catholic school? And do you know that his mom wanted him to be a priest? These routines, you know.
So you're introducing yourself to the audience as you're entertaining.
That's the lesson. He said to me, where am I from, Tommy? I said, Waukegan, Illinois. He said, how do you know that? I said, I've heard you said it. You damn right I said that. I'm the only comedian you ever heard of from Waukegan, Illinois, and you're the only comedian I've ever heard from Harvey, Illinois. And Tommy, there's more Harveys out there than there are Chicagos.
I love it.
Yeah.
What great advice.
Wasn't that terrific? And I followed it my whole life.
How do you build a set, Tom? How do you work?
It starts with one joke at a time. If you can write a joke. I tell young comedians today, if you're in the business and you want to be a comedian, you can't write material, take courses on how to write jokes. Or if you're wealthy, or get a good job and get a lot of money and pay people to write you jokes. Because that's the hardest part of it all, is writing jokes, is writing material that you can keep coming up with new material. As I pointed out, I did 61 appearances on The Tonight Show, and you had to do a new 6 minutes every time you did it.
Because you had to throw it out because everybody's seen it.
Yeah, and Johnny didn't want 2 guys going to bar jokes. He wanted original monologues. So I'm in a constant state of writing material at that time. But it's not rocket science, but if you're writing a joke, comedy is usually just 2 things. Number one, it's 9/10 surprise. The audience laughs because they didn't think you were going to say that or do that. So the setup line has to hide the punchline.
Right.
The other rule is there are no victimless jokes. Who's the victim in a joke?
That's right.
Me, you, society, the government.
Somebody.
The airlines.
Somebody's going to hurt when it's over.
Somebody's wrong in this joke.
Robin Williams stole your joke at the jokes at the comedy club, the comedy store.
Yeah, him and I, when Robin first started out, I had done 2 Tonight Shows, and he was brand new. He came in from San Francisco. I was headlining a club out in Newport Beach called the Laugh Stop. And I had opening acts, Roger and Roger, Willie Tyler and Lester, a black guy who has a puppet, and a new kid named Robin Williams. And when they told me, I said to the guy, what kind of material does she do? He said, no, it's not a guy, not a girl, it's a guy. I said, oh. And then Robin did 15 minutes, and he was brilliant. There was no one like Robin Williams. But he also had this mind that could grasp every joke, absorb. And he did a joke of mine when he was on Mork and Mindy. At the end of the show, he closed with a monologue to Ork. And he did a joke about it. And I went and talked to him about it. And then I wasn't mad. He wanted to pay me. He wanted to give me, I said, I don't want any money for it. I said, Robin, now I can't do it. You know, never would have said you stole that from Robin, you know.
Yeah, that's right. It's dead to me now.
Yeah.
What is the power of comedy? I mean, when I look at you, it really all started with you wanting to help people and use laughter to help kids. Then it grew into, really, you were teaching racial healing and joy at once. What is the power of comedy?
It's healing. It was a theory many years ago that, you know, laughter is psychologically a deterrent. Because if you're watching a comedian work or listening to a comedy album, you're not thinking of your problems because the brain can't function two thoughts at the same time. So comedy is psychologically a deterrent. But because of Norman Cousins, the man who wrote Laughter Math, the Healing of a Heart or something, the doctors told him he was going to die because he had stress. He had a heart condition and years of stress. And he laid in the hospital and thought, if stress, negative input made me ill, then positive input would make me well. He checked out of the hospital. He would only watch I Love Lucy reruns, Candid Camera, Three Stooges, Marx Brothers. He wouldn't watch the evening news. He lived 27 years after the doctors told him he was going to die. Because of him, UCLA did research on what happens to the brain when you laugh. When you have a hearty laugh and you've laughed so hard, and tears are coming on you, and your body, this sense of well-being, your body's going through an actual chemical change. So laughter is not only psychologically a deterrent, it's physiologically therapeutic. So therefore, comedians are physicians of the soul. So you can call me Dr. Dreesen if you want.
Dr. Dreesen, thank you.
But laughter is healing, and that's why people are drawn laughter more than ever now. These comedy clubs here in LA, the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factory, the Flappers, Comedy Chateau, packed every night because people now, especially after the COVID lockdown, and they realize how much they miss laughter. Now, you know, it's and also it's addicting.
Yeah, it is addicting. You want to keep laughing.
Yeah.
You want to keep enjoying this with other people, and we need more laughter. What's missing in comedy today, in your opinion?
Well, you know, what's missing is, and I'm not a prude. I'm a street guy. I don't have a degree from academia. I got a doctorate from the streets. So hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you had a doctorate from working with the legends of comedy and entertainment and music, and you yourself are on that level. Well, that's where you live. So you're down here now. I'm asking you to look at these people down here.
They have to say the F word every other sentence. I'm at the Laugh Factory a while back, and I'm waiting to go on, and two young comedians are around the corner, and I don't know they're there, and they don't know I'm there. And I'm looking at my notes because I'm getting on next, and I hear one of the comedians say, you know, Tom Dreesen's here. And the other comedian said, yeah, you know, he's old school. And my ears perk up, and the other comedian said, he's old school. What do you mean? He said, well, you know, he doesn't use the F word. And the other comedian said, he doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives? I stick my head around the corner and I said, adjectives.
Real adjective.
That's right.
Done.
But you know, so I think comedy is a lot meaner now than it was, and I'm sad that the audience really likes that kind of stuff too. But that's really probably the. It's easy to write those kind of.
I was about to say it's a cheaper laugh though, isn't it?
Hey, I can do that. I do stags. I've done stag roast. I can do a stag roast for the best of them. I'm an ex-GI. I'm all that stuff. But when I opened for Smokey Robinson, Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Mac Davis, Tony Orlando and Dawn, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Natalie Cole, they had family audiences. Yeah. And that was their audience, not mine. I was the opener. So my responsibility is to get that audience up for them, not to get the audience angry or to insult them. So I had to learn to work clean. I had to work in doing the Tonight Show. You had to write material that can make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. Now, here's the difference, Ray. There's a difference between being naughty and dirty.
Right. Innuendo is one thing.
I can do naughty.
Yeah. But the other is, it's easy laugh, it's cheap. I call it low humor. And sadly, that's what passes for general comedy today.
And you know why? Cable television came along. Before cable television, in order for you to get on and become known as a comedian, you'd say, how do I get on the Tonight Show? You watch those comedians, and you knew you had to do clean material. Then cable came along, you'd say whatever you want to say.
for all.
Now, the problem is every 2 years there's a brand new audience. All these young kids today are going to those comedy clubs for the first time, and they think, oh, that's comedy. You know, women talking about, there's women today that Red Fox would walk out of the room. You know, and guys, you know.
Yeah. Tell me about how Sinatra came into your orbit, and he loved your material. Why?
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you how it happened accidentally. I'm touring with Smokey Robinson. I'm working in Lake Tahoe at Caesars. Frank Sinatra's appearing at Harrah's next door. Well, I had worked Harrah's many times, you know, and so I'm with Smokey for 1 week. Again, divine intervention. I could have gone any one of those 7 nights over to see Frank. I don't know why I went that night. So after my show at Caesars in Lake Tahoe, I bolted out the side door. I didn't even change out of my stage clothes. There's one casino, I ran past it, ran into Harrah's. I'm running into the showroom. The vice president of Harrah's Hotel, Holmes Hendrickson, is standing there talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. As I'm running into the showroom, because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. Frank Sinatra created more excitement, as you know, walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act.
It was a thrill.
When he walked out in that arena and wherever he was, and I didn't want to miss that. So I'm running to go in there, and Holmes Hendrickson saw me. He said, Tommy, come here. I reluctantly went over. He said, Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin. Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer, a very powerful guy in our business. He said, Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen, and I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra. And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he heard it a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. He said to me, hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? I said, Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than $50,000? He laughed. He said, ooh, I like this kid. They gave me a week with Frank at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. The second night there, we went out to dinner afterward. Frank and his wife, Barbara, took me out to dinner. I can remember like it was yesterday, Ray. He set his knife and his fork down. We're sitting just like this. He set his knife and his fork down. He said, I like your material, and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested. And I didn't say, let me check my calendar. I said, yeah.
Yes, sir.
And it turned into 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year, a friendship that I stayed in his home 6, 8 times a year, toured with him all over, drove with him in his car till the sun came up night after night. I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral, and I miss him every day of my life. There was no describing the excitement of flying in Frank Sinatra's jet all over the world and walking out in front of 15, 20,000 people, 40,000 in Hawaii. Wow. And the challenge that I got to get this audience up for this guy. Wow. It was so exciting and so challenging, you know.
He said you were neighborhood guys.
Yeah.
The two of you.
You know what happened? A guy from the New York Times one time said to him, he wasn't doing an interview. We were in a place in New York, you know, Patsy's in New York.
Oh yeah, sure. Sinatra's favorite restaurant.
Yeah. And mine too. And, you know, but a guy was walking out from the New York Times, and he walked up and he said to Frank, hey, Frank, how come you keep this guy Dreesen? Jokingly, you know, how come you keep this guy Dreesen? He said, you mean besides the fact that he's funny? And he said, yeah, besides that. He said, well, if I'm a saloon singer, and I am, then Tommy's a saloon comedian. He said, by that I mean, we're just a couple of neighborhood guys. And I never forgot that quote. That's really touching to me, because that's what I am. Yeah. And when I was alone with him in the car till dawn, and we drove around, he never went to bed till the sun came up. Yeah. He was nocturnal. Yeah. There were so many nights he wasn't the great Frank Sinatra, and I wasn't this kid comedian. Mm-hmm. We were two guys from a neighborhood. It's kind of similar neighborhoods. Yeah. He had 3 children, girl, boy, girl. I had 3 children, girl, boy, girl. You know, I'm Catholic, he's Catholic. Yeah. I'm half Sicilian, he's half Sicilian. You know, the other half is Irish. Yeah. He used to tell me, Sicilians, Tommy, we're talking about getting emotional. He said, Sicilians cry alone, Tommy. Sicilians don't cry in public, they cry alone. I said, well, I'm half Irish. He said, well, Irish cry when they change bus drivers. Because at his funeral, I told a joke. I knew he wanted me to be funny, and I told a funny story, because I kept thinking, he said, because I was emotional. Yeah. I was afraid I was going to burst into tears. But I remember what he told me. He said, Sicilians cry alone, you know.
You went to Mass with him.
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
And you're a man of faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
well, I go to Mass here, too.
Yeah, in the book you describe that going to Mass with Sinatra and he making you work at the Mass.
Well, St. Francis of Assisi if you ever go down in the desert, that church is an exact replica of the St. Francis Church in Italy. Wow. And Frank Sinatra and his mother wanted to build that church, and he did shows and raised a lot of money to build that church. So that's when I was down there with him. We'd go to Mass there on Sundays. But one particular time, he says, there was like 20 house guests. And he said, all right, we're all going to Mass tomorrow. All the Catholics had to go to Mass. The Jews and the Protestants could stay home. They were kind of happy about that. So Frank, we go there and we get to church, and Frank said, by the way, we're going to read the gospel today. And I said, why are we going to read the gospel? He said, because they want lay people to do that, Tommy. So I told Father Blewett that we read it. I said, okay, now I'm getting the mystical, because, there's a lot of words in there, that I knew I wouldn't. And I'm trying to get my stuff down. And I had to follow Gregory. First of all, the priest says, we're sitting on the altar, and the priest said, reading from today's gospel will be Mr. Gregory Peck, Mr. Roger Moore, Mr. Frank Sinatra, and Mr. Tom Dreesen. And the whole church began to buzz, who's Tom Dreesen? So now I had
now the pressure's really on.
Now I got to follow Gregory Peck. When Gregory Peck reads the gospel, people say, didn't he write this? I think he's God. I had to follow, and I got through it. Now at the end of the Mass, we're ready to go. As you know, the Catholic priest said, go, the Mass is ended.
All right.
But he said, but before you go, perhaps some of you may have seen comedian Tom Dreesen on The Tonight Show talking about his Catholic school upbringing. Maybe he'll honor us with a joke. Frank said, get up, tell him a joke.
Oh, no.
I couldn't think of a joke to tell in church. I'm going to the pulpit and I'm thinking, God, one, no, I can't do that one. No, I can't do that. And finally I said, many years ago in a parish in the Midwest, priest was serving Mass, and he turned around in the middle of Mass and he said to the congregation, I'm the priest in this parish, and I make $200 a week, and that's not enough. And moments later, the bishop was out of the sacristy. I'm the bishop in this diocese, and I make $400 a week, and that's not enough. And up in the choir, the guy playing the organ says, I'm the organist in this diocese, and I make $2,000 a week, and there's no business like show. And the church cracked up, and Frank said, funny, let's get out of here.
Good, let's leave.
Let's get out.
Cars were waiting. He always left. When at the end of the night, when he finished, New York, took a bow, he left.
Like the building was on fire.
There was no waiting in the dressing room or cleaning up. You had to be ready to roll.
The limos were waiting right off stage. When we went off stage, all the people with us, escort, everybody into that, we would shoot to the private jet. There were many nights we were in the private jet flying over the venue. People weren't even in their cars yet. Wow. Except toward the end, the last couple of years, he started lingering on stage longer and longer, because they see, everywhere we were going, people were coming to say goodbye to him.
Yeah.
And he picked up on that. I told him that one night in Salt Lake City. The audience couldn't they threw flowers on him. And they standing ovation after standing ovation. As he was leaving the arena, they were throwing flowers on him. We got in the car, in the limo. We were rushing toward the private jet to the airport. And he was staring out the window, just him and I. And I said, great crowd tonight. He goes, yeah. Yeah. I said, yeah. He said, I think, Tommy, they think they're seeing me for the last time. And once again, he read an audience. He knew. And I said to him, well, yeah, we haven't been here in a long time. And he said, yeah, but they're coming to say goodbye to me now. And that's exactly what they were doing. Everywhere we were going those last couple of years, Omaha, Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, wherever we went, they knew he wasn't coming back there again. And his fans were coming to say goodbye to him. And people had said that toward the end, he didn't sing as good as he used to. They didn't care. He could have read the phone book.
Yeah.
They wanted to be in the same room with this living legend.
No, it was. I mean, they grew more. Look, I saw him first when I was maybe 17 years old, and I took my wife to see him. We went to see him in Maryland at the Radio City. There was nothing like it, and it got more emotional as it went on. It frankly didn't matter whether he was in top voice that night or not. He was the 20th century when he walked out there. Well,
first of all, Frank Sinatra, if you were a Frank Sinatra fan, his music was a soundtrack of your life. You know, you went steady. When somebody loves you, it's no good unless you got married to his music, love and marriage.
Yeah.
You know, you got divorced to his music. It's 2:45. You got remarried the second time around. You know, his music was a soundtrack of your life. Yeah. And again, in the end, it wasn't for them. It was also for him. You know, I seen him days where he was up in years, and you could see he didn't want to go. And we'd get to the show, and we'd get there. But then when he got on stage and that light hit him, 20 years would fall off of his face. And, you know, come fly with me, let's fly away.
No, it's like his body remembered.
Yeah.
He would just go to that place, sometimes song to song, because one he did in the 50s, the next one he did in the 70s.
Yeah.
You could hear the difference in voice. It was like he was younger when he sang the older song.
Yeah.
It was very odd watching him live.
First of all, what most people have to realize about Frank Sinatra, what they forget all the time, what a brilliant actor he was. Oh, yeah. He won the Academy Award From Here to Eternity. He should have won the Academy Award in The Man with the Golden Arm.
Yeah.
But when you gave Frank Sinatra a song, it was a script, you know.
Just the words.
You just handed himself. It was a script. What did the writer feel the night the writer took pen in hand? He would immerse himself in that lyric and become that lonely guy in the bar whose woman left him, and he's never going to find love again. And you felt that. And the joy of a song. No, there's no comparison to him in any other singer. I don't care who you talk about. No. And this is what I brought this for, because I thought this would come up. Bob Dylan once said, right from the beginning, he was there with the truth of things in his voice. He was one of the very few singers without a mask. I could hear everything in his voice, death, God, the universe, everything. He is the mountain. That's the mountain you have to climb, even if you only can get part of the way there.
Wow.
That's what he said to singers.
How true is that?
Yeah, from Bob Dylan.
Did he warm up before a show?
He had a thing that he told me, an old Irish teacher in New York, he used to pay him $1 an hour when he was a kid. Taught him the vocalize, you know, come and take a walk with me. He would, at home, he would do that. He would take up another octave. Come and take a walk with me.
And he'd keep going up the scale.
Sometimes Bill Miller did have a piano in his dressing room before the show, go up the scale. Bomb, come and take a walk with me. Then bomb, come and take a walk with me. He would take up the scale, you know, and that's how he warmed up before the show, you know. And the other thing too, something that I tell young singers all the time, when he was going to do a new song, record, all day long he would walk the floor and talk that song as a poem. You will be my music. You will be my song. When all the songs are out of tune and all the rhymes ring so untrue, then you will be my music. Yeah. He would do it as a poem all day long, and then he'd go sing it.
Like a monologue.
Yeah.
Why did he wear the tux? He told you. Why? He always wore the tux.
Every singer that I worked with, I'd say to them, if it was their show, if I was an opening act, when I headline, I can wear whatever I want to wear. But when I was opening act, I'd say, how would you like me to dress? Sammy Davis Jr. once said, I think we should dress at least as good as those who came to see us. So in Vegas in those days, the first show, dinner show, suit and tie. The second show would be like sport coat. Yeah. But then as time has gone by, that doesn't exist. Yeah. But Frank Sinatra, we always wore a tuxedo. Huh. And I said to him one time, why do we wear a tuxedo? He said, Tommy, if we were going to do a show for the King and the Queen tomorrow, would we wear a tuxedo? I said, yeah. He said, well, that garage mechanic in Detroit and his waitress wife, who work all year long to buy 2 tickets to our show, they're just as much royalty as the King and the Queen. And that's why we wear a tuxedo for them, too. Wow. I said, whoa, that every night is a command performance.
It had that air of class about it.
Yeah.
My grandfather, who was, working class, now I'm going to cry, working class guy, had his restaurant. When Sinatra came to his restaurant 2 times, when Frank walked in, you would have thought God himself, or Moses, was coming to the place. Yeah. I mean, it was, and he said, and the one thing he always would say, boy, he brings such class.
Yeah.
He walks in, he's got class. And he did bring that elegance. There was an elegance to him, which you have in your comedy as well, by the way.
That's kind of but the thing that I always say, Frank Sinatra wasn't a saint, but he did some saintly things. Yeah. There's a lot of critics who don't like him. Yeah. And you'll see it on the internet, and they'll say he was this, he was that, and they always bring up the mob and all this other kind of stuff. But there was something old school about Frank. Ray, if we were sitting at a table, and there were like 5 or 6 women, 5 or 6 guys who were eating, and one of the ladies got up to use the ladies' room, down at the end of the table. He'd be talking to you, but in the corner of his eye, he would rise out of his chair, because the lady just got up.
Came in, right.
And then he'd continue talking to you like this, and she would come back, and before she sat down, he would rise out of his chair, to her to be seated. He had old school type manners in a lot of ways. And again, he was, there was no middle with Frank Sinatra in a lot of ways. If Frank worked, he worked harder than anybody, and you better know your job because he knew everybody's job.
Yeah.
Nelson Riddle said Frank was just another instrument in the orchestra. He blended in with them. He knew, one time in Caesars with a Nelson Riddle arrangements, they had all these strings. And Frank at rehearsal stopped in the middle of a song and said to the third violinist, you're out of tune. This guy was in the LA Philharmonic. And he said, no, I'm not. And the other guy said, Ray, you are, to the guy, Harry, and sure enough, Frank's ear picked up.
Wow.
And so when it comes showtime, he worked as hard as anybody I know. You want to play? He stayed out every night till 6 o'clock in the morning. He could play as hard as anybody I know. In the 14 years I toured with Frank, I turned down more sitcoms than most comedians get offered in a lifetime because I knew this was the end of an era. And also, it was this full circle thing. 10-year-old boy shining shoes, and Sinatra's on the jukebox, and now that 10-year-old boy, Frank's calling him back out to take another bow. Those are moments, it's even now when I'm telling you this, I'm getting chills.
Well, the book captures that. Your book captures so much of that. I was in tears reading parts of the book because you are commemorating and capturing the end of that era.
No.
I mean, not only this amazing performer and your time with him, but your own career. And tell me about the other great Frank in your life, your uncle Frank.
Polizzi, yeah.
Was much more than Uncle Frank Polizzi.
Yeah, it was funny. I wrote my book is called Still Standing. The subtitle is My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. That's a cheap plug on Amazon.
It's worth the read.
But anyhow, and I decided that I had to come clean with this story. There were 8 of us kids. I grew up, Dreesen children, and I didn't look like my brothers and sisters. I had dark hair, black hair, and Frank Polizzi was my mom's brother-in-law, who owned the bar that I told you about earlier. That I used to emulate, tell jokes and stuff. And I loved him. He was my favorite uncle. He was just my favorite uncle. He was a guy. He was a tough guy. He didn't take anything from anybody, anywhere, anytime. He ran the bar. And he had a band called Frank Polizzi and the Venetianeers, and he sang. And my mom would sometimes sing in the band, and my dad, Walter Dreesen, played trumpet in the band.
Yeah.
And anyhow, and I loved the guy, Frank Polizzi. He just, and he'd slip me an extra quarter once in a while, $50. But when I was shining shoes. But anyhow, I looked just like his 2 sons. And everywhere I'd go when I was a little boy, a lot of times people say, hey, Polizzi, how you doing? I say, my name isn't Polizzi, my name is Dreesen. He's my uncle. Oh, and I think they thought it might be my mom's brother. Anyhow, long story short, when I'm about 14 years old and I'm learning where babies come from, I didn't want to think that my mom and dad did this, let alone my mom and my uncle, my mom's brother-in-law. And it just tortured me because I didn't know what to do. I had these thoughts that what if my mom and him, and maybe that's why I look like my 2 cousins.
My cousins, yeah.
And one day I wanted to talk to him, and I went for a walk. And he said, what is it? I said, I think that you're my father. And he got uptight. He said, why do you think that? I said, because I don't look like my brothers and sisters, and I look like Don and Buzz, his kids. He said, he walked for a little bit and he said, well, it's true. He said, and you can go tell the world, but you'll ruin your mom and dad's marriage and mine too. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I just needed to know. And anyhow, I got distant from him after that. I was very uncomfortable around him after that. I was like 15. I went in the Navy at 17. After a couple of years in the Navy, I'd come home on leave. And at that point, I didn't care who planted the seed. I still love Walter Dreesen. He was my dad. He's always going to be my dad. And I always called him Unc. But anyhow, we started getting real close. And it was our secret. And no one knew. I would not tell anybody, and that was our secret. And I carried that with me throughout the years. And finally, Walter Dreesen died, and Frank Polizzi died. And all that was left was my mom and my aunt. and they lived together at that time.
Ah.
So I wasn't going to ever talk. And then my mom, before my mom passed away, I had a long talk with her. I sat down, and she was one of those Irish Catholics. She had gone to confession, and that's behind her.
Gone.
And, and we don't want to talk about it. But one night I said to her, Mom, I know, I know, and Frank knew, and he told me, and so forth and so on. But it doesn't matter, Mom. It doesn't. She said, Tommy, sometimes we do things when we're young that when we look back over our life, why we did them, and we're sorry for them. I said, no, it's over now. I said, besides, Mom, had it not happened, I wouldn't be standing here right now telling you how much I love you. You know, and she said, and we never talked about it again. You know.
Wow.
But on his deathbed, when Frank Polizzi was dying, I went to the hospital, and everybody was leaving, and I was left alone with him. And I said to him, you know, we were talking, and he never cry. He was a tough to say. And he said to me, do you have any ill feelings about us that you want to talk about? I said, no. He said, Tommy, don't hold back just because you know I'm dying. He said, is there anything you want to get off your chest? I said, no. I have no ill feelings whatsoever. I said, everything I own, everything I have, I'm here. And I said, do you have any ill feelings? He said, the only thing I feel bad about was every time I'd be in a bar somewhere and you were on TV, I couldn't tell people, that's my kid, that's my boy. And I said, well, one day I'm going to win an award in show business or something, because he had sung as a young guy.
Right.
I said, and I'll accept that award in your name.
And you did.
And he turned his head and with tears in his eyes, said, don't tell me I saw him cry. And years later, I received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor Award, where he had come to this country when he was 7 years old on Ellis Island, you know, on the USS Italia.
Huh.
And I accepted the award in his name
So
and
you
my
came
mother's
to
name.
peace with it.
Yeah, so.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Tell me, to bring the Sinatra story full circle, Tom, you were with him in Richmond, Virginia, when he falls.
Yeah.
It was hot. I mean, it was blazing hot out.
Yeah.
And I guess he was, dehydrated, right?
Well, you know, Frank stayed up till dawn, and then he'd get up, he would sleep catnap during the day, he'd get up and he had a cup of coffee and comes to do the show. When I was on stage, I said, man, it's stuffy in here. I never sweat when I'm on stage, unless I'm bombing, but I haven't done that in a while.
That never happened.
I never sweat on stage. And I was thinking to myself, man, it's warm in here. It's really warm in here. And anyhow, when Frank goes out, he was in the middle of My Way, and his next song is New York, New York, and he's going home. But he will never take his coat off, and he was sweating profusely. He dehydrated. He collapsed. At first, we thought it was a heart attack, and we rushed out there and everything, you know. And then he collapsed, and a doctor came running up on the stage. Paramedics came, and they're trying to get him out of there, and he wouldn't go.
He wouldn't stay at the hospital.
No, he said, they said, the paramedics couldn't release him. They said, only the hospital can release you, Mr. Sinatra. We can't we have to take you there, because it's a state law.
Yeah.
That they you know, so take him to the hospital. Now, 3 doctors, a neurologist, a heart specialist, and some other natural doctor, yeah, but they all cleared him, and all 3 doctors. Now he's there too long now, and he's getting testy. And Hank Catania, Frank's road manager, and I are there in the room. And Frank's testy. He said, "The jet ready?" He said, "Yeah, the jet's ready." He said, now, first doctor comes in, Mr. Sinatra, I checked you out. You're in real good shape. He said, I would prefer you spend the night here. He said, so that we can release you in the morning and know that there's nothing wrong. But it's your call. He said, Doctor, thank you very much. Then the neurologist came in and he said, Mr. Sinatra, all the scans came in. You're fine. But I too would prefer that you spend the night here, you know, but it's your call. He said, thank you, doctor. Now the third guy, he's doing one of these. Mr. Sinatra, I'm paraphrasing, but unlike my 2 colleagues, my esteemed colleagues, who I have tremendous respect for, I'm not going to ask you to spend the night here. I'm going to demand that you spend the night here. Now, the moment he said that, Hank Catania looked at me, I looked at him and said, oh, this is not gonna go well. He's going on, I graduated second in my class or something like that, and blah, blah, blah. And if I would not, on my watch, that something would go wrong with the great Frank Sinatra. So therefore, I insist that you spend the night. And Frank said, that's it? He said, I said, let's get the hell out of here.
That's it.
We both did.
That was the release.
Typical of Frank, yeah.
What did he teach Tom Dreesen, Sinatra, that time with him? What did he teach you as a man, as a performer?
as a performer, that party as much as you want, but don't throw this show away. Don't throw the show away. That every night is a command performance. That when you walk out on the stage, you take command. These people paid to see you, and they deserve the best you got. Even if you're not feeling good, you got to go deep inside and come up with the best you got that night. The second thing that I'll never forget, this is Frank Sinatra, arguably the greatest career show business has ever known. The actor, Grammys, Emmys, Oscars. Never, ever, ever, ever in his life was he late. Never was he ever late for anything, any performance. Anytime you told him to be there, he was on time. If you told him to be there, if he told you wheels up at 9 o'clock and you showed up at 9:01, you were watching a plane go down the runway.
Wow.
He was always early, always on time. I learned that in the military. Fortunately, I went 4 years in the military before I toured with him, because he was always on time, always early. So he said to me one time, if someone tells you to be in their office at 9 o'clock and you show up at 9:15, you just told them your time is far more important than their time. He said, no one's that important, Tommy. Respect everybody else's time. That's another great lesson he taught. Wow. And his generosity. Raymond, you cannot describe how generous this man was, and did not want you to know, did not want people to know. And if you witness it, you better not talk about it. We talked one time, he was an avid reader.
Yeah.
He read a book called The Magnificent Obsession, as I did too, by Lloyd C. Douglas. Its predecessor was a book called Dr. Hudson's Secret Journal. In the book, it is The Secret of Success. If you want to become successful, then what you have to do, once you ask your master, I want to be a comedian, or I want to be a singer, or I want to be, whatever it is, I want to be an engineer, or I want to own my own restaurant. Once you pray that, you have to really believe that ask and you shall receive. You have to really believe that your master is going to do that. But from the moment you make that request, then from that moment on, you got to keep your eyes and ears open for his less fortunate children and do something for them without them knowing it. And if you do that, within 30 days, your master will reward you toward your endeavor. So if you saw if somebody needs some help and you can help them without them knowing it, that's how it worked. Now, if you had to do something for somebody and there's no way they wouldn't know it, you had to swear them to secrecy. Say, I'll do this for you, Raymond, but you must not do this for anyone else.
You can't tell anybody.
Pay it forward. And that book was written long before the movie Pay It Forward came out. And he not only talked that talk, he walked that talk,
Amazing. Tell me about your cancer struggle, which I was completely unaware of, and how your faith sustained you through that.
I had cancer twice, and I beat it both times. And it could be on the horizon again, because it keeps reoccurring. But, at one time, the second time I had it, my daughter and I went over to USC to two experts, a man and a woman doctor. They're looking at two big screens. I sat in the office, and they're typing in and whispering to each other. And I figured they're going to put me on chemotherapy or something like that. And the doctor turned around and he said to me, Mr. Dreesen, go home and put your affairs in order. That was July 2018. Wow. And I said, my daughter started to cry. I said, are you telling me that I'm going to die? He said, yes. Wow. I said, how much time do I have? He said, only God knows that. I said, well, I'm going to ask God for a second opinion. and I left there, but Ray, I wasn't panicked.
You weren't panicked?
Well, I thought about death many, many times in the military and before that. I mean, all your life in planes. And
sure.
I thought about death a lot. And as you know, growing up Catholic and altar boy and all that, heaven, and is there a heaven?
Eternity is always in front of you, yeah.
All this, and I thought, and one thing I thought about, I said, I hope when my time comes, I hope that if I have time, I'll have the courage not to whimper and moan and whine and complain, why me, to accept it. For two reasons. One is because I had a great life. All my dreams came true. I had a tough childhood. It was like God said, I'm going to put a load on you for the first half of your life, but if you survive, the second half is on me. And that's what happened. Yeah. So I wanted to have that courage. If I was told that I was going to die, I want to have the courage that I would face it with courage. And also because my children, one day they're going to die, and they're going to watch how I die. And I wanted to, if I could, to go out with courage so that my children would say, one day when their time comes, I want to go out like Dad, So, and my daughter was with me at that time. So, but I went back to my home. I called a good buddy of mine named John Romeo, who used to write for Jay Leno. He's a researcher. Whatever you say, I got dandruff. He'll find it.
He'll figure it out.
But I called him to the house and I told him, this is what I got, blah, blah, blah. And I told just a small body of people, my nephew and his wife, my daughters, and they all became my road manager and his girlfriend. They became my support team, and they started researching all over Israel, Germany, everywhere. But they came across two names, two doctors, a Dr. Lowy in San Diego, and there's another Dr. Backrek or something from Washington, D.C. in my mind. My nephew got a hold of the doctor in D.C. He said, I won't operate on your uncle. He's too old. I wouldn't operate on a man half his age. He said, it's a 10-hour surgery called HIPEC, HIPEC, which is where they put you under and they go in and get all the cancer out and they flush out that area with hot chemo. And it's 400 times more effective. Not 100, 400 times more effective while you're under. But seriously, so anyhow, the Clint Eastwood fixed me up with MD Anderson in Houston. And there was a Dr. Curie there, research doctor. I kept talking to him. But I said to him one day, do you know what Dr. Lowy? He said, Tom, he trained here at MD Anderson. You want me to call him for you? I said, yeah. 48 hours later, as busy as Dr. Lowy is, he took me in to his office, looks over everything, did a pathology on me, said, I can do this surgery. And he said, on this date, I said, could you do it a week later? Because I'm playing in the AT&T in a golf tournament. He laughed and he said, yeah, I'll do it a week later. and I went in and it was 7.5 hour surgery. When I came to, he said, we got it all. You're disease-free. I said, Doc, you saved my life. You're a genius. He said, no, I'm not. I'm stubborn. I said, I'll take that.
Take stubborn. Yeah. Wow. And your faith really carried you.
Well, because I believe in the power of prayer. And I went back to my church and I gave a sermon at Ascension Church on the power of prayer.
Huh.
When I got up my first laugh on show business the night I was with Tim, I couldn't sleep that whole night. It was a Friday night. Saturday morning, I got up. I couldn't sleep all night. I got up Saturday morning. I went to church, the church where I had been an altar boy. And there was no one in church. It was an empty church. And I prayed. I got on my hands and knees and I prayed. I said, God, now I know what I want. If you could let me make my living as a comedian, I'll never ask for anything else. If I could I didn't want to become a star. I didn't say any of that stuff, my own series. The thought that you could make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. And I said, if I can make a living making people laugh, I promise I'll do charities and I'll promise I'll give back. I'm making all these promises. Well, all those prayers came true. Everything I prayed for came true.
And he held you to them.
And he held me to it because I went back to that church and I told the congregation this story about the cancer. Listen to me. I said, how many of you out there were ever thinking about someone that you hadn't seen in a long time and the phone rang and you pick and said, person. And you said, you won't believe this, I was just thinking about you. Or how many times you're thinking about someone, you're walking down the street, you haven't seen them in 12 years, you turn the corner, and there's that person, and you're saying, I was just thinking about it. And they said, you know what, I was thinking about you too. How many people, has that ever happened to you? The whole congregation raised their hand. I said, if we humans can transfer thought, then how much can Supreme Being transfer thought? If we can transfer thought, and obviously we can, so my prayers, I know, are being heard. They've been heard, being heard. So, when I was going under in that surgery room, there were 3 big lights on me, and I remember reading something that said, look for me and I'll be there. I read it, one of those books about Jesus. It said, look for me and I'll be there. But I was laying on the operating table, looked up and there was 3 lights and I went, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And I went out.
There they are.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It said, look for me and I'll be there,
Well, I'm glad you made it and you're here. Why do you think you're still here, Tom? And what are you called to do in this moment? I
really believe that now that all my prayers have been answered, that I got to motivate other people. I give motivation talks on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. I do it for corporate America. I do it for colleges, high schools, but I do it for comedians for free. I call it the joy of stand-up comedy and how to get there. I do it at the Laugh Factory, at the Comedy Store, at the Comedy Chateau. I've done it in New York. I've done it in Chicago. I've done it in Philadelphia. And I think that's what I'm here to inspire to and to make people feel good. I love hearing the sound of laughter. I was touring with Sammy Davis Jr. and got to Caesar's Palace and just thought, wow, my prayers are being answered. In 5 minutes, maybe 10, I wrote this down. And I do it once in a while. And I say, it's called The Sound of Laughter. As far back as I can remember, or shortly thereafter, I love to hear the sound of laughter. Whether grown-ups or children, it really didn't matter to me. If I can make people laugh, I was as happy as I can be. You see, when you make people laugh, they get such a lift. My mom once told me this is a God-given gift because you'll get so much love and yet you're still able to give. I knew I wanted to do this for as long as I live. So I left my home in Harvey, Illinois to tour around the country and spread some joy. Success was ahead. I just didn't know how far. Soon I was broke and sleeping in a car. But I worked and I prayed and I planned and I dreamed. There were times I was alone, or so it seemed. I begged for jobs everywhere I could and I bombed a lot of times. But I started getting good. They laughed one night in Boston, I'm proud to say, and soon they were laughing out in LA. Now, if you're a comedian in those days and you wanted America to know, you had to get a spot on the Johnny Carson show. Well, that happened one night, and what a break for me. Soon my name was on Caesar's Palace marquee. Well, God's been with me now, and I've gone pretty far. Who knows, maybe one day I'll become a big star, but if I don't, it won't matter at all. Believe me when I tell you I've had a ball. So now I wish for everyone what's happened to me, to find the work that you love, because that's really the key. So when I die and go to the hereafter, I'll miss all of you, my friends, but most of all, I'll miss the sound of your laughter.
Wow. It's full circle. It is the full circle.
Yeah, I wrote that almost in 10 minutes. It just came to me, and you know.
When you were playing with Sammy,
yeah. I went back to my dressing room one night and I just wrote that.
I'm going to ask you a few questions. I do a little questionnaire.
Okay.
And these are rapid fire.
Take your time.
Okay. The person you most admire, Tom, is whom?
You know, my dream would have been that the person I most admire was me. But I never lived up to that. Wow, that's really, really the person I most admire. You know, I know this is going to sound hokey to a lot of people, but even as a little boy, I wanted to talk to Jesus. I can't believe that this guy at age 30, he only preached 3 years. He never went
the town.
35 miles outside of his own town. And what he did, this incredible thing. I wanted to ask him so many questions, you know, and I admired the courage that he went to the cross. The courage, the beatings, the ridicule, the spitting on him, and that life changed the lives of so many. So yeah, I would have to go there.
What is your best feature? Keep it clean, Tom.
I think it's always that I really do like people, and I really do like making them laugh. You know, all the time I had the cancer, I never told anybody at my country club. I never told anybody there, because every time I walk in, they'd, hey, here's Tommy, what's the new joke? Tell us the new latest joke. I didn't want people looking at me with puppy eyes saying, how you doing? Is it okay?
Yeah.
You're going to be fine?
That's the worst.
Yeah. But so I think it's that I really do enjoy people, and I enjoy being around them.
And entertaining them.
And I tell you, Raymond, I could be feeling, if I was home for a few days, I'm a bachelor now, you know, I'm divorced, my ex-wife passed away, but if I'm at home for a couple of days, and maybe I'm not feeling good for some reason or the other, but if I go out and all of a sudden I'm with some people, I feel good. I'm a people person.
What's your worst feature?
My temper on the golf course.
Only on the golf course?
Yeah, well, I'm Irish Italian. There's a war going on inside of me.
I know that. I recognize that war, but believe me, personally,
the Irish guy says, don't get mad at him, buy him a drink, and the Italian guy said, buy him a drink and then beat the hell out of him.
Your greatest regret?
Wow, that's a good question. My greatest regret. My greatest regret is that when I went through a divorce, I wish I would have done it better. I wish I would have. Frank Sinatra told me when I was going through my divorce, he said, I went into Vegas. We were working at the MGM Grand. He said, "Hey, you bringing the wife with you?" I said, "No, Frank, we're getting a divorce." And he said, "Oh, Tommy, I can't give you any advice on marriage, but I can give you advice on divorce." He said, "Stay friends with her, not for you, not for her, but for the children. Stay friends with her." And I didn't. We had a bitter divorce. We later talked for a little while, and then we didn't. And I carry this to my grave, and I say a prayer for her every night, because I wish without her I wouldn't have had my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. I wish I would have been friendlier to her. That's my greatest regret, and I feel real bad about that.
Wow. What's the greatest piece of advice you ever got?
The greatest advice I ever got was probably from the books. I read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind, but that this is your universe, and you're in charge of this universe. This is your universe. That you don't have to, you are careful what you put in here, so be careful what you put in here. Negative thoughts are dirt. You don't have to, they'll flow into your mind. You don't have to let them flourish, So you are in control of this universe of what goes in here and what goes in here. When I'm giving motivation talks, I take a glass of water and I pour dirt in it and I stir it up and I say, "Drink this. Somebody drink this." And they won't. I said, "You won't put filth in here. Why would you put filth in here? If you won't drink dirt, why would you think dirt?" You can get negative thoughts out of your mind and replace them with positive thoughts. That's great advice, because it shows you that this is the universe you've been given and you're in charge of it. You really are. You have more power. You are far more powerful than you realize.
If you could not do what you're doing now, entertaining people, making them laugh, bringing them joy, what would you do?
If I couldn't do that, I probably, I probably maybe been a writer. I really like the military. The military saved my life in a lot of ways. I was a raggedy kid. I went in the military. The first time in my life, I had 3 squares a day. First time in my life, I was equal to everybody. They shaved all of our heads, and we all had the same clothes on. I had been a raggedy, poor kid. I really love America. I've been around the world. I love this country. It is the greatest country, and the people that put us into this position, those people who founded this country, who wrote that Constitution, those are brilliant human beings. The men and women who died, in World War II, that if we lost that war, you want to argue with me about wars, you can argue with me about every war you want. You can't argue with me about World War II. That if we lost that war, there was no doubt what Hitler had in mind for us, no doubt what Tojo had in mind for us. Those men and women, the women that went to work and went to war, and the men that they were heroes to me. Again, I think I just love this country. I wish maybe I would like to have been a politician that would, in a way, that's kind of one who really believed in the Constitution,
his principles,
really believed in the principles
of the country,
Harry Truman once said, "Show me a politician who comes out of office with more money than he went in with, and I'll show you a crook."
We got a lot of them today.
And they're all coming out with more money.
That's right.
Those are long answers, aren't they? Yeah.
No, it's a good answer. And Tom, I have to tell you, what a joy to spend time with you. I have been the beneficiary of your talent and your gifts to us for so many years. And to spend this time with you has just been an honor for me.
I really enjoy it, but whenever I do these interviews, I always think that, wow, we did an hour and a half, and watch it and be like 12 minutes.
No, I'm going to give you the hour. You deserve it. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you. All right, here's the whole. Of all the people I get to interview, I have to admit, you probably already know, I love entertainers most of all, because they care about the audience. They care about their craft. And Tom Dreesen is not only hilarious, but you see what kind of heart he has. I knew a lot about Frank Sinatra. I saw him 30 times in concert. I met him. I have just about everything he recorded, even some things that aren't released. And I've read a ton of books about him. But I had never heard those 2 lessons of Sinatra that Tom shared today. His deep respect for the audience, which even touched the way he dressed, and his care to hit the mark on time, and never throw a show away. Never throw a show away. I encounter so many people who phone it in and just do the minimum. The greats never do that. They never throw a show away. I want to thank Tom Dreesen for his gift of healing laughter. Boy, do we need it today. What a great talent he is, and a great interview. I hope you'll come back to Arroyo Grande soon. Why live a dry, constricted life when if you fill it with good things, it can flow into a broad, thriving Arroyo Grande? I'm Raymond Arroyo. Make sure you subscribe and like this episode. Thanks for diving in. See you next time. Arroyo Grande is produced in partnership with iHeart Podcasts and is available on the iHeart Radio app or wherever you get your podcasts.